President Obama takes the law in his hands regarding Obamacare. And the Tea Party has spoken who they like for president. John Boehner, Speaker of the House, caved in again to the Democrats, and a film icon dies. You're watching The Voice of Resistance.
Standing for truth in the four corners of America. Fighting for justice on the frontiers of the culture wars. And turning resistance into an art form. Randall Terry.
President Obama, our imperial, emperor-like, pseudo-czar, god figure from possibly Kenya who walks among us, has once again taken his pen in hand. Well, he's decided that it's too big a burden on millions of Americans for their employers to have to comply with the health care bill. You know, his landmark legislation that he signed into law. There are over 7 million Americans who are employed by companies that have between 50 and 99 employees, all right? About 7% of the workforce. And President Obama realized that these companies are starting to cut people's hours. He doesn't, the companies don't have to provide health care for these employees if they are not full-time. So they're cutting back to 35 hours a week. So now these folks aren't getting health care, or they're losing their health care, and they're losing hours, so their paycheck is getting smaller, all because Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, is crippling American businesses, or hobbling, certainly harming American insurance companies. Well, guess what? I've got a question. Does anybody think that President Obama actually read the bill? I mean, I know now that he's got areas that are being brought to his attention, and he's using his pen to make the corrections. But what thinking person believes that President Obama actually read the bill before he signed it? I'm just asking. You may remember that prior to the passage of Obamacare, Nancy Pelosi admitted that she hadn't read it and encouraged members of Congress to vote for it without reading it. Here's what she said.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
So we've got President Obama acting like an emperor, a czar, a pseudo-dictator, just literally outside of the rule of law, striking down portions, saying you don't have to comply for a year, no, 2 years. You don't have to comply for 2 years. Just taking the law in his own hands, like kind of the Wild West sheriff, gone bad. You've got Nancy Pelosi saying, we don't even know what's in the bill, but we want you to vote for it anyway. And in case you think this is odd, let's play a clip from Representative Conyers, a far left socialist Democrat who was at the National Press Club and was asked about the health care bill before he voted for it. Here's what he said.
I love these members that get up and say, read the bill. What good is reading the bill if it's 1,000 pages and you don't have 2 days and 2 lawyers to find out what it means after you read the bill?
So we've got President Obama saying, change the law. We've got Conyers saying, what's the use in reading it? Unless you've got 2 days and 2 lawyers to understand it. Wait a minute, excuse me. You voted for something that you said you couldn't even understand. Something that is literally affecting the lives of tens of millions of Americans. And you're admitting to us that you didn't read it, but you voted for it? Well, I have a suggestion for President Obama. Here, it's just a small idea. President Obama, why don't you, rather than just exempt these businesses, why don't you exempt the millions of Americans who have individual health care policies who are now being told your insurance is canceled? You don't have insurance anymore. They're being run through the ringer. There's an idea. I'm just saying. He won't do that, by the way. He won't do it. Let me make a couple of comments because the healthcare debacle is not going to go away until and unless, ready? Number one, we find out who wrote it, hold them accountable. No, that's not going to happen. Number two, we have to fear that maybe what Obama wanted all along was that this bill would cause the collapse, the ultimate collapse of a cohesive healthcare system in America. Why? So that the government can come and save us. Ultimately, what socialists want is a single payer system where the government puts a gun to everyone's head and says, you're going to pay for your neighbor's health care. No, you're going to pay for this child's health care over here. And no, we deem you as too old and too frail to warrant health care, so you get to die. Listen to me. In the final analysis, this bill is with us, and the slow and steady demise of America's quality health care is with us until, number one, we elect a Congress and a president who repeals Obamacare, completely repeals it. And number two, and this one's going to be tougher, we admit that we don't have a right to our neighbor's money to pay for our health care. Hear me, listen to me. We have to admit that I don't have a right for the government to put a gun to my neighbor's head to force him to pay for my health care. We admit it. Number two, then we embrace it. And number three, then we advocate it, where we say Medicare, Medicaid, all of these ways where the government is forcing people to pay for their neighbor's health care are unconstitutional, that it is a form of socialism and Marxist redistribution of wealth, and it is not what freedom and self-government mean. Let's go back to true charity. Let's go back to hospitals being run by churches, community hospitals where people contribute and donate money, or doctors give free health care to certain people because they need it. In other words, Christian civilization, not a socialist plantation.
A nation without a conscience is a nation without a soul. A nation without a soul is a nation that cannot live. Sir Winston Churchill.
What role will the Tea Party activists play in the nomination of a Republican candidate for president in the year 2016? Well, we know one thing for certain. The Tea Party right now on the right-hand side of the aisle is without question the strongest political force, grassroots movement in America. Well, they recently held a poll online from one of the largest, if not the largest, Tea Party organization, who found that at the top of the list was Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, and then Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky. At the bottom of the heap, the number two from the last, was former Governor Jeb Bush from Florida. I was glad to see him on the bottom of the heap. And current Governor Chris Christie from New Jersey, he was dead last. Here's a question. Will the Tea Party people be able to coalesce behind one or the other of them as the race proceeds, should either of them run for president? There'll be another question, by the way, that comes up, and that is Ted Cruz eligible to run for president? He was born in Canada, all right? His dad was working in an oil field there, or something to do with natural gas production, fuel of some kind, and he was born there. He is an American citizen. His mom was actually from Delaware, his dad from Cuba. Now, John McCain, to make a point, John McCain was born in the Panama Canal Zone, but he still was a natural-born citizen. The issue is this, that there has never really been a strong legal definition of what a natural-born citizen means. So most people think that Ted Cruz can run. He could see his candidacy challenged should he decide to run. He's in the middle right now of renouncing his dual citizenship because he's a Canadian citizen as well as an American citizen. And he's probably doing that to run for president. Well, right now, we know for sure that he's heading for Iowa. Iowa enjoys significant time in the spotlight every 4 years because it is the first state in the union to have a caucus, and it's known for its retail elections. And by that, I mean that the candidates actually have to get out there and shake hands with the voters. Certain people like Rick Santorum. By the way, Rick Santorum was in the middle of the heap on the Tea Party poll. Certain candidates like Rick Santorum spent unthinkable amounts of time in Iowa, shaking hands, going to people's living rooms, literally having 8, 10 potential voters in the living room, answering questions, going to small diners, standing on the street, meeting voters. So Ted Cruz is on his way to Iowa to speak at a very large and respected homeschool convention. When I ran for president in 2008, we had a table there. I interviewed Rick Santorum there. It's kind of the who's who in not just homeschooling, but on right-wing evangelical political activists on that front. Excuse my syntax there. So Ted Cruz is heading for Iowa, and that is an indication that he is, of course, flirting with running for president. I want to implore my fellow Tea Party activists and friends. We must have a more defined economic agenda. And number 2, we must not yield to the temptation to put money ahead of morality. So, number 1, allow me to make this point. There were a lot of people at Tea Party meetings that were holding up signs saying, "Don't touch my Social Security, don't touch my Medicare," even demanding more government benefits. Well, the way I understand it, the essence of the Tea Party on the economic side is that we do not want to embrace socialism. We want to embrace liberty. All right? Rand Paul is a self-conscious libertarian when it comes to his economic policies, like his dad before him. And if we are going to ever get the levers of government back into the hands of good men and women who don't want to steal from us to give it to our neighbor, then we have to have a cohesive, consistent view of the role of government when it comes to how our money is taken and spent. Now here's the second challenge. Don't abandon the babies. Don't abandon marriage. I've spent a lot of time in various Tea Party meetings, met with a lot of Tea Party people, spoken at their events. And some of them are very dedicated believers who know that the innocent blood being shed by abortion in this country will bring the demise of the republic. And so for them, the cessation, the stopping of the murder of babies is critical, the paramount challenge facing us. Likewise, the defense of marriage and the threats of divine judgment that we find throughout the scriptures regarding this type of behavior in so-called same-gender marriages, that this brings the displeasure of heaven upon us. There are Tea Party members who say we want nothing to do with the ethical issues. We want to only talk about money. To those who believe that, I ask you this question. Do you believe that you will find the favor of Almighty God if you are willing to throw under the bus the babies and the covenant and the sacrament of marriage? Do you believe that God himself would sit on his throne, that heaven would cheer if you say, we have to focus on money? I remember somewhere in sacred scripture that says, the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. Let's keep our priorities, folks. Human life, human liberty, and then property, then our money. If we'll do that, keep a consistent view of the world, maybe we can prevail.
Hey, everyone's been asking me, when's Unstoppable coming out on DVD? Well, it's here. and I have created my own deluxe signature version of Unstoppable that contains not only the movie, but over 5 hours of additional curriculum and study guides for your family. It's perfect for your homeschool, educational facility, small group Bible study, and family devotions. And I'm going to share with you some of the spiritual warfare that surrounded the release of this film. This box set also includes extended scenes, new music videos, the inside scoop on the whole Facebook controversy. So what are you waiting for? I made this special version with my family in mind, and I know your family will be blessed by it too. Unstoppable 2.0 Deluxe Signature Version, available only here at KurtCameron.com. I can't wait for you to experience what's inside.
House Speaker John Boehner has again caved in to the president and to the Democrats and agreed to pass a spending bill that allows the federal government to keep spending like a drunken sailor for pretty much the next year. No budget, once again from the president, no cuts in spending, no cuts in the deficit. Why? Oh, and he has said that he'll vote for it. Let me make a point. He's doing this for political reasons. He does not want the Republican Party, in his judgment, to be saddled with the accusation that they are the ones who are a drag on the American economy, that they're the ones who are forcing a shutdown, they're the ones that are affecting the full faith and credit of the United States of America. In other words, this is political. It is not about the rightness or the wrongness of how our money is being spent. He is gambling that it will help the Republican elections, or the election of Republican House and Senate members in 2014. He's gambling that by not getting in a spitting match over this, that we can focus on the failure of Obamacare and the failure of Obama's economic policies to revive the country. But here's what's just a little bit troubling to me. He's gambling with your money. He's gambling with my money. In other words, by saying that we're not going to require any spending cuts, that we're not going to require anything to go towards deficit reduction, he's saddling you and I and our children and our grandchildren with more debt. He's using our money to gamble that the Republicans will maintain control of the House, maybe get control of the Senate. He's putting politics ahead of principle. Now, some people would say to me, he needs to do this. We've got to take control of the House, or keep control of the House and take control of the Senate. And we don't want to be mired down in a fight over military cuts or budget cuts or food stamp cuts or cuts in any number of benefits to people. In other words, the redistribution of wealth. Because we've got to get control. To which I say, it's a point worth discussing, but at what cost? You dance with who brung you. If you get into power by being a political prostitute, if you will sell out your basic principles, what are you going to do when you get there? And that is why we have had Republicans controlling vast portions of our government, and we still keep going down the economic and ethical drain. Because what matters to them is getting into power, not the reversal of the chaotic course that we're on. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. Shirley Temple Black, as she was known in adulthood, has passed away at age 85. I'm guessing by now that you've heard the news. Franklin D. Roosevelt, when he was president, had this to say during the Great Depression. As long as our country has Shirley Temple, we will be all right. When the spirit of the people is lower than at any other time during this depression, it is a splendid thing that for just 15 cents, an American can go to a movie and look at the smiling face of a baby and forget his troubles. In case you didn't understand what inflation is doing to our country, a movie that cost $8 or $10 today in some of our cities was 15 cents during the Great Depression. That political statement aside, Franklin Roosevelt touched on something that's critical and beautiful about the place of storytelling in the American psyche, in the human psyche, all right? Human beings were wired, I believe, from heaven itself to want to hear stories and to need stories, to need examples, to need fairy tales. The ethics of Elfland, as Chesterton called it. We need those stories to lift us, to give us ethical parameters, ethical guidelines, to give us a moral to the story, to inspire us to sacrifice, to love, to deeds of courage or of valor, of sacrifice for our family or for a complete stranger. Let's watch a few clips in honor of this great lady.
Like, would you like beans and oyster stew? And I like what you like on account I love you. I go where you go, any place will do. The very first time that I sang, an ordinary day becomes a holiday when I'm with you. Everybody's asking me, who's that bunch of personality? I'm presenting you right now. Daddy, take a bow. Da-da-dee-da-da, swing me an old-fashioned song. Old-fashioned song. Croon me an old-fashioned tune. Da-da-da-da-da, but he can't like the sardine can. Tourists trucking left and right, many's mooching, what a night. So sweet in life as love's young dream.
I encourage you, find some of her films, watch them with your kids. I loved her as an actress when I was a boy, and she lifted my spirit. And then watch out what your kids are watching. Watch out for what your kids are watching. Because whereas Shirley Temple used to provide just solace to the soul, there's a lot out there today that is poisonous to the soul. We honor you, Shirley Temple. May God grant her the joys of life eternal. This is the voice of resistance.